Have you ever wondered why so many men lose themselves after 50, right at the very moment life finally starts making sense? Not because they're weak, not because they need a woman, but because no one ever warned them about the quiet trap that destroys more men in their 50 seconds and 60 seconds than aging, regret, or loneliness combined. Here's the truth no one will tell you. A man's greatest danger after 50 is not being alone, it's choosing the wrong woman because he's afraid of the silence. Most men don't fall in love at this age. They fall into relief. Relief that someone pays attention to them again. Relief that someone laughs at their jokes. Relief that someone touches them after years of emotional drought. And because that relief feels like resurrection, they surrender their boundaries, their peace, their freedom, sometimes within weeks. But here's the Stoic truth. What feels like comfort can quietly become a cage. What looks like companionship can become responsibility. And what seems like connection can slowly drain the strongest years of your masculine rebirth. Men over 50 are entering a chapter of life. Younger men dream of clarity, stability, purpose, emotional mastery. Yet most lose it the moment they attach themselves to the wrong woman. This video isn't about avoiding love. It's about protecting the life you spent decades building and understanding the 5 dangers that almost every man over 50 overlooks until it's too late. If you're in your 50 seconds or 60 seconds, this message is not just advice, it's a warning. And if you listen closely, it might save the most powerful years of your life. There is a quiet truth most men never confront until they're already drowning in it after 50. Loneliness doesn't just whisper, it echoes. It fills the room when you wake up. It sits beside you at dinner. It trails behind you on quiet Sunday mornings. Divorce, the loss of long-term partners, empty nests, retirement. All of it creates a strange, hollow space that even strong men struggle to navigate. But the danger isn't the emptiness itself. It's what the emptiness makes you susceptible to. Because when a man reaches 50 or 60, something subtle shifts inside him. He no longer seeks excitement, he seeks relief. Not passion, but presence. Not intensity, but attention. And this is where the hidden trap begins. When a woman shows interest in a man at this age, it often strikes him like a bolt of lightning. Compliments feel more meaningful. Conversations feel deeper. Her smile feels like medicine, not necessarily because she is extraordinary, but because it has been a long time since someone made him feel visible. That visibility becomes addictive, and without realizing it, a man starts mistaking validation for compatibility. He starts interpreting attention as desire. He starts confusing emotional comfort with emotional connection. He starts believing that loneliness is a problem a woman is supposed to fix, instead of a state he is meant to master. This is the first trap, and it is the most dangerous because it disguises itself as something good. A woman's attention becomes the antidote to years of feeling unseen. Her presence becomes the bridge between who he used to be and who he hopes he still is. But Stoicism warns us, anything that gives you identity can also take it away. And men over 50 forget this more than anyone. Because after decades of hard work, sacrifice, and responsibility, They feel they've earned companionship. They feel they've earned someone to lean on. They feel that after all the storms they've survived, heartbreak, betrayal, financial pressure, death, divorce, they deserve emotional comfort. And they do. But comfort has a cost when it arrives before clarity. Women in their 50 seconds and 60 seconds are navigating their own battles: fear of aging, fear of being alone, financial instability, insecurities, unresolved trauma, complicated family dynamics. Many are not looking for love, they're looking for stability, emotional or financial. They're looking for someone who can hold the weight they no longer want to carry. This doesn't make them bad. It makes them human. But it also means their attention toward you may not be rooted in who you are, but in what you represent. And when a man is starved for validation, he can't see the difference. He tells himself a story: she likes me, she appreciates me, she understands me. But he forgets to ask the deeper question: does she value me, or the stability I provide? When a man enters a relationship from emotional hunger, the dynamic is already imbalanced. He is grateful for her presence, and she can feel it. Gratitude becomes attachment. Attachment becomes dependence. Dependence becomes leverage. And slowly, the man begins to give more than he intends to. He sacrifices time. He sacrifices peace. He sacrifices routine. He sacrifices self-respect without even noticing. Not because she demanded it, but because he feared losing the validation she gave him. This is how men in their 50 seconds walk into relationships that drain them. They are not manipulated, they volunteer. They hand over their boundaries the moment a woman offers them attention after years without it. A man at 25 wants a girlfriend because he's chasing excitement. A man at 35 wants a girlfriend because he's chasing stability. But a man at 55, he wants a girlfriend because he's chasing reassurance. Am I still desirable? Am I still worthy? Is there still someone for me? These questions weaken him, not because they're wrong to ask, but because he looks for the answers in another person. Stoicism teaches that no external connection should define your internal state. Yet men in their second half of life often violate this principle the fastest. They outsource their self-worth. They hand it to the first woman who gives them attention. The tragedy is not that men over 50 seek connection. The tragedy is that they settle for the first woman who makes them feel alive again. And in doing so, they ignore every red flag, every mismatch, every sign of misalignment. They ignore their intuition because the validation feels too good to question. But validation is the most deceptive form of connection. It gives warmth, but not stability. It gives hope, but not depth. It gives excitement, but not compatibility. If a woman is drawn to you because you provide emotional grounding, financial safety, or stability, that attraction will vanish the moment you stop providing it. Attraction built on what you give collapses when you stop giving. Attraction built on what you are grows deeper with time. Most men over 50 don't know how to tell the difference because they've forgotten who they are when they're not trying to please someone. The first reason to never rush into a girlfriend after 50 is simple but profound. If you haven't rebuilt your identity from within, The first woman who validates you will own parts of you that you should never give away. A Stoic man doesn't enter a relationship because he is lonely. He enters because he is complete. He doesn't seek validation. He brings value. He doesn't chase warmth. He radiates it. And when he chooses a woman, it is from clarity, not from hunger, because the man who needs validation is vulnerable, but the man who generates his own is unstoppable. There is a strange irony in a man's life when he is young. He spends his days chasing freedom, freedom from rules, from expectations, from limitations. But when he finally reaches his 50 seconds and 60 seconds, freedom is no longer something he chases. It is something he has finally, undeniably earned. You've survived enough storms to know what matters. You've built a life at your own pace. You wake up without the noise of a household depending on you. You come and go on your own terms. You spend money without justifying it. You rest when you want. You travel when you feel like it. You lift weights because it clears your mind. You meditate because it keeps your heart steady. You say no to anything that disrupts your peace. This freedom is not accidental. It's the reward of decades of sacrifice. But here's the danger the moment a man in his 50 seconds enters a committed relationship. That freedom becomes the first thing to disappear. Not because she takes it away, but because he gives it away far too quickly. It begins subtly. She asks if you can change your schedule. You agree because you want to be considerate. She prefers weekends spent together instead of you going hiking alone. You compromise because it feels harmless. She wants more time, more involvement, more emotional presence, and little by little, you adjust to maintain harmony. You don't even notice it happening at first. The erosion is microscopic. A skipped gym session, a postponed trip, a hobby you stop prioritizing, a morning routine interrupted, a quiet afternoon replaced by emotional management, a peaceful evening consumed by someone else's storms. And before you know it, the life that once felt like a calm ocean turns into a calendar of obligations you never meant to take on. What most men forget is that peace is a structure. It requires space, solitude, discipline, and ritual. When you remove any one of these factors, the entire structure wobbles. And relationships at this age, even healthy ones, demand a piece of that structure. Stoicism teaches that a man's inner fortress is sacred, but a fortress is only as strong as the boundaries around it. When you let someone walk in without guidelines, they don't just enter your life, they reshape it. Women at this age often have deeply intertwined social circles. Children, grandchildren, aging parents, or emotional histories that pull them in multiple directions. When you become her partner, you are inevitably pulled into that world. Your peaceful mornings turn into negotiations. Your evenings turn into conversations you didn't choose. Your weekends transform from open landscapes into schedules dictated by someone else's needs. The freedom you spent half a century earning dissolves quietly, without fanfare, without warning. I've coached men who spent years building the kind of peace younger men fantasize about. They traveled alone, read books in silence, reconnected with their health, rebuilt their masculinity. and finally felt grounded. Then they entered a relationship, hoping to share the peace. But peace cannot be shared with someone whose inner world is unstable. Within months, these men felt exhausted, conflicted, and trapped, not because they lacked affection for the woman, but because they no longer recognized their own reflection. Their days were full, yet their souls felt empty. Their time was shared, yet their hearts felt suffocated. Their lives were busy, yet their purpose was fading. A man over 50 doesn't lose his freedom the way a young man does. A young man gives it away because he doesn't value it. An older man loses it because he forgets how fragile it truly is. And it's not just freedom of time, it's freedom of thought, freedom of energy, freedom of emotional bandwidth. When you commit to someone at this age, you inevitably take on their rhythm, their pace, their mood, their anxieties, even if she's a good woman, even if she means no harm. Her presence shifts the structure of your days. Men underestimate how deeply relationships reshape their internal world. They imagine companionship will amplify their peace. Instead, it often interrupts it. Peace thrives in solitude, purpose, routine, and clarity, and these are the very things that relationships unconsciously disassemble. This is why so many men over 50 find themselves saying something they never said in their youth. I feel like I lost myself. Not because she controlled you, not because she demanded too much, but because you surrendered the one thing that made this chapter of your life extraordinary, your independence. The freedom of a 50-year-old man is not the freedom of a boy with nothing to lose. It is the freedom of a man who has seen enough, suffered enough, and grown enough to know what truly sustains him. It is sacred. It is delicate. It is the foundation of the masculine renaissance, a rebirth that can only happen when a man has room to breathe. And the tragedy is that men often only realize the value of that freedom after they've already traded it for companionship that wasn't worth the cost. A woman can add warmth, depth, and beauty to a man's life, but she cannot be the foundation of his peace. Peace must be built alone, protected fiercely, and offered selectively. At this stage of life, your freedom is not something you share casually. It is something you guard like a kingdom. Because when a man loses his freedom at 55, the loss cuts deeper than it ever could at 25. There is no second youth to reclaim it. There is no reset button. The time you give away now is time you never get back. A stoic man knows this. That is why he is slow to commit, quick to observe, and unwavering in preserving the sovereignty he has earned. He understands that freedom is the final luxury of manhood and the first casualty of the wrong relationship. One of the greatest misunderstandings men have in their 50 seconds and 60 seconds is believing that relationships get easier with age. They assume women their age are calmer, more patient, more emotionally mature, more grounded. They imagine that life experience softens the storms that once consumed their relationships in their youth. But here's the part that no one tells you. Age doesn't remove emotional history, it multiplies it. And when two lives collide in the later chapters of life, the emotional weight a woman carries is often far heavier than men expect. By the time a woman reaches 50 or 60, She has lived an entire emotional lifetime. She has loved, lost, forgiven, broken down, rebuilt, and buried parts of herself she never speaks about. She has survived heartbreaks, divorces, betrayals, and disappointments she doesn't want to relive, but still fears will return. Her past doesn't disappear with age. It travels with her. And when you enter her life, she doesn't simply bring her presence, she brings her history. This is where many older men are blindsided, because men experience emotional aging differently. Men compartmentalize. They move forward. They detach from the past more easily. But women carry emotions like a second heartbeat, even if they appear calm, composed, and self-controlled. Everything they've lived through sits beneath the surface. A man at 55 often feels lighter than he did at 35. A woman at 55 often feels heavier. And who becomes the emotional anchor for that weight? You. Not because she intends to burden you, not because she wants to overwhelm you, but because men at this age radiate something women crave: steadiness. Your voice is calmer, your reactions are measured, your mind is slower, clearer, more deliberate, your presence is grounding. Women sense that instantly, and they begin to lean on it. It's not malicious, it's instinctive. But here is the danger: the more a woman leans on your emotional strength, the more you begin to absorb her emotional storms. You don't notice the shift at first. It starts with small confessions, minor stress, family tension, a disagreement with one of her adult children. You listen because you're kind. You comfort because you're experienced. You advise because you've lived enough to know what matters. But emotional sharing has gravity. What she releases, you catch. What she unloads, you take on, slowly, without any dramatic explosion. You become the default emotional caretaker, the therapist, the stabilizer, the protector of her inner chaos. And here's the subtle tragedy. Every storm you calm for her takes wind out of your own sails. At 25, you can handle emotional turbulence because you're overflowing with energy. At 35, you still have the bandwidth to absorb someone else's emotions and reset yourself afterward. But at 55, your energy is no longer infinite. Your emotional bandwidth is no longer disposable. Your attention is no longer cheap. This stage of your life is supposed to be your internal renaissance, a return to self-mastery, clarity, purpose, physical discipline, spiritual grounding. Your nervous system should be calmer than ever. Your days should be quieter than ever. Your responsibilities should be fewer than ever. But emotional entanglement with a woman who hasn't healed her past turns your renaissance into recovery. Not your own recovery, hers. You begin waking up tired, not physically, but emotionally. You begin feeling restless. Even though your schedule is simple, you start losing focus. Though nothing has changed in your environment, the peace you fought for becomes harder to protect. The purpose you rebuilt becomes harder to prioritize. The freedom you earned becomes harder to enjoy. Not because she is toxic, not because she is intentionally draining you, but because emotional weight does not evaporate, it transfers. A woman's unresolved storms always find the nearest shelter. And older men, with their calm, steady presence, make the perfect shelter. This is why Stoicism emphasizes internal sovereignty. A man must govern his inner weather, not someone else's. But emotional dependence blurs boundaries. Soon you are reacting to her moods, adjusting to her anxieties, soothing her insecurities, managing her struggles, carrying her past and forgetting your own needs entirely. I've spoken to countless men in their 50 seconds who entered a relationship hoping for emotional companionship, only to find themselves overwhelmed by emotional responsibility. They didn't fall out of love, they fell out of themselves. Because emotional overload doesn't crush you in one blow. It wears you down slowly. It chips away at your emotional capacity, grain by grain. It makes you silent, not peaceful. It makes you tired, not calm. It makes you passive, not stoic. You become a man who is constantly there for someone else, but no longer fully present for himself. And here's the hard truth. When you spend too much time regulating someone else's emotions, you lose the ability to regulate your own. Your peace weakens. Your focus fades. Your purpose softens. And the worst part is that you start believing this is normal, that emotional caregiving is simply part of the relationship at this age. But this is not love. This is role reversal. This is emotional inversion. This is a man abandoning his inner world to manage someone else's. A relationship should add to your emotional life, not replace it. If a woman has done the work to heal, if she carries her own weight, if she is secure and grounded, she becomes a partner. But if she hasn't, she becomes a responsibility, one that slowly erodes your spirit. The emotional overload men face after 50 is not a storm. It is a slow leak. You don't drown, you simply sink, inch by inch. And by the time most men realize what happened, they're already living a life they never intended to choose. There comes a moment in many men's lives, often after 50, when they wake up and realize something unsettling. They're no longer the man leading their own life. They're managing someone else's. It doesn't happen through force, manipulation, or dramatic conflict. It happens through kindness, through empathy, through the slow erosion of boundaries that once felt unbreakable. Because when a man in his 50 seconds enters a relationship, he enters it with maturity, patience, and emotional steadiness. And, ironically, those strengths are the very qualities that push him into a role he never intended to play. The caretaker, not the partner, not the lover, not the equal counterpart, but the human buffer between a woman and her storms, and in time, between her and the consequences of her life. Women in their 50 seconds and 60 seconds carry responsibilities that are heavier than most men realize when they first begin dating them. Aging parents, financial instability, health fluctuations, unresolved trauma, conflict with adult children, chronic stress from decades of emotional labor. These forces shape her daily world. And when you step into her life, you become the stabilizer of that world. At first, it feels natural to help. You're a grounded man. You're capable. You've lived long enough to be level-headed, generous, reliable. When she gets overwhelmed, you soothe her. When she feels uncertain, You step in. When she faces conflict, you handle it. You do this because you're strong and because it feels good to be needed. But here is the slow, invisible danger. The moment you begin solving the problems she should be solving herself, you begin sacrificing the man you've spent a lifetime becoming. Caretaking doesn't take your power all at once. It steals it in microscopic exchanges. A cancelled workout because she needed support. A skipped morning routine because she woke up anxious. A weekend plan replaced by her family drama. A peaceful evening absorbed by fixing something that isn't your responsibility. By themselves. These moments seem insignificant, but stacked over months, they reshape your entire identity. And suddenly, you're not the man guiding your life. You're the man responding to hers. This is where the masculine edge begins to dull. Your purpose weakens because your time isn't your own. Your discipline fades because your routines aren't consistent. Your clarity disappears because your mind is constantly processing her emotional world. Your presence diminishes because you're always managing, adjusting, absorbing. A man cannot stay sharp when he is drowning in responsibilities he didn't choose. And most older men step into this dynamic without ever consciously agreeing to it. They tell themselves they are being supportive, that they are being a good partner, that they are doing what a strong man should do. But strength without boundaries is not strength. It's servitude. Stoicism warns us that a man must guard his inner domain with unwavering discipline. Yet, in relationships after 50, men often abandon this discipline because they confuse compassion with obligation. They forget that helping out of choice is noble, but helping out of emotional pressure is destructive. Caregiving becomes caretaking. Support becomes sacrifice. Compassion becomes depletion. Women sense stability, and instinctively, they turn toward it. But emotional reliance is a slippery slope. The more she leans on you, the more you instinctively carry. And the more you carry, the less of yourself remains. Here's the dark psychological truth. When you repeatedly save someone from their own storms, they stop learning how to stand in the rain. And you become the umbrella, not the man. Umbrellas are useful, but they are not admired. They are not respected. They are not desired. They are used. Not maliciously, not intentionally, but inevitably. A man who becomes a caretaker loses the polarity that makes him masculine. Not because caregiving is unmanly, but because it shifts the energetic dynamic from romantic to parental. And once that polarity changes, it rarely shifts back. You cannot be the man she leans on, the man she vents to, the man who handles every crisis, and still be the man she looks at with admiration, attraction, and desire. Masculine polarity requires sovereignty, a life that is centered around your mission, your growth, your rhythm. But caretaking forces you into a life centered around her comfort, her problems, her fragility. The cost isn't only emotional, it's spiritual. Men who fall into this pattern start to lose the fire in their eyes. They lose the depth of their solitude. They lose the hunger for purpose. They lose the calm that comes from being rooted in their own life. And worst of all, they lose the version of themselves they spent decades refining. Caretaking robs a man silently. It doesn't break him. It erodes him. Until one day, he looks at himself and realizes he has become responsible for a life he never chose, a world he never wanted to manage, and emotions that were never his to carry. This is why entering a relationship after 50 requires more awareness than at any other age. A young man can afford to lose himself. He has time to rebuild. But a man in his 52nds and 60nds, he is in the most valuable chapter of his life. He cannot casually hand over his time, his peace, or his emotional strength. A Stoic man knows this. Your role is not to fix her life, it is to live yours fully. Your purpose is not to carry her burdens, it is to honor your own path. Your duty is not to become her caretaker, it is to protect your inner world from becoming a place you no longer recognize. Because once you lose your masculine edge, once you surrender the fire, the discipline, the sovereignty that defines you, getting it back is far harder than you think. There is a powerful secret about manhood that no one tells you. When you're young, your real prime does not happen at 25, or 30, or even 40. Your real prime happens when most people assume you've already peaked. It arrives quietly, without celebration. Somewhere between 50 and 70, a chapter men rarely expect but deeply feel once it begins. It's the moment when everything finally connects: your discipline, your scars, your wisdom, your resilience, your sense of self. It's the season where your impulses settle, your ego calms, and your clarity sharpens into something unmistakable. It's not youth reborn, it's masculinity perfected. This is the masculine renaissance. You wake up one morning and realize you no longer need to prove anything. Not to women, not to society, not to your past, not to your younger self. Your achievements have already spoken. Your failures have already taught. Your experiences have already shaped you into a man who knows exactly what he values and what he refuses to tolerate. For the first time in your life, the noise of expectation is gone. The pressure to fit into someone else's vision disappears. You stop chasing approval and begin living from a place of inner command. But here's the tragedy that destroys thousands of men in this stage. Just when they step into the most powerful version of themselves, they give it all away for a relationship that diminishes them. The masculine renaissance is fragile. Not weak, fragile, meaning it requires space, solitude, focus, and consistency. When a man starts living for his second life, his rebirth, he needs room to grow, to reflect, to rebuild the physical and mental strength that youth once gave him automatically. He needs silence to sharpen his intuition. He needs routine to sustain his discipline. He needs freedom to rediscover what gives him purpose. But when he enters a misaligned relationship, all of this evaporates. Not because the woman is harmful, but because relationships, by nature, demand compromise. And compromise at 55 is not the same as compromise at 25. At 25, compromise shapes you. At 55, compromise shrinks you. One of the most painful stories I've heard was from a man who spent his entire adult life raising children. supporting a family, working overtime, sacrificing sleep, giving every ounce of energy he had. When he hit 58, he finally experienced something he hadn't felt since he was a young man: freedom. He traveled, trained, meditated, rebuilt his career, and became sharper, stronger, calmer. He called those years my resurrection. Then he met a woman, and within a year, he said something that broke my heart. I didn't lose myself in my marriage. I lost myself after it. When I tried to share the life I rebuilt. That sentence captures the danger perfectly. Men assume their masculine renaissance is indestructible. They think that once they reclaim themselves, they'll never lose that power again. But all it takes is one relationship with mismatched values. One woman who drains instead of energizes. One dynamic built on neediness instead of alignment, and the fire starts to dim. You work out less because she wants more time. You travel less because she needs reassurance. You read less because her problems take priority. You think less about your purpose because your peace is constantly interrupted. Soon, the man who felt invincible begins to feel smaller. This is the cost men underestimate: the loss of their second life. Stoicism teaches that purpose must remain the center of a man's existence, especially in his later years. When purpose becomes fuel for the final and often most meaningful chapter of his evolution. Women have emotional peaks. Men have purpose peaks. And the masculine peak happens later in life, when the mind is clear, the ego is quiet, and the world finally slows down enough for a man to see himself fully. But when he ties himself to a woman who is not aligned with his pace, when he enters a relationship from loneliness instead of sovereignty, when he compromises his structure to maintain hers, he trades his renaissance for a return to survival mode. The renaissance ends. The rebirth stops. The man vanishes. And here is the deepest truth most men don't realize until it's too late. At 50 or 60, you're not just losing time. You're losing your final and most powerful chance to become the man you were always meant to be. This chapter of life isn't a decline, it's an ascent. It's not the closing of a story, it's the rewriting of it. It's not fading, it's focusing. And every moment of clarity, every surge of discipline, every spark of purpose matters more now than ever. Because you have fewer years ahead, but far more wisdom to use them. A misaligned relationship steals that advantage. A stoic man understands this. He protects his renaissance like a kingdom. He chooses solitude over chaos. He chooses clarity over companionship. He chooses purpose over emotional entanglement. Not because he doesn't value women, but because he values the man he has finally become. And if a woman enters his life, she must elevate that renaissance, not erase it. Because the man who embraces his renaissance becomes something rare, a man younger men admire, a man women respect instinctively, a man who radiates presence instead of desperation, a man reborn, not diminished. And that version of you is far too valuable to sacrifice for the wrong relationship. If there is one truth that defines a man's second life, it is this: a man over 50 does not need to be saved. He needs to be centered. He doesn't need validation. He needs alignment. He doesn't need companionship, he needs purpose. Everything else becomes secondary, optional, and only valuable if it strengthens the man he is becoming. Most men enter their later years believing the blueprint forward is simple: find a woman, rebuild companionship, create a stable relationship, and enjoy life with someone by their side. But Stoicism flips this idea on its head. It teaches that the quality of your life is determined not by who you attach yourself to, but by what you anchor yourself in. And the anchor must always be your purpose. Because purpose is the only thing that ages like fine whiskey. It grows richer as you grow older. It sharpens as your ego fades. It deepens as your experiences accumulate. Women may come and go, but a man's purpose is the one relationship that never abandons him unless he abandons it first. A man over 50 must build his life in a way that nothing external can shake it. Not affection, not disappointment, not loneliness, not desire, not attention. The Stoic path is about developing an internal gravity so strong that everything in your life orbits around your mission, not around the emotions of someone else. When a man lives from this center, everything changes. He no longer chooses women from fear. He chooses from abundance. He no longer gives his time impulsively. He gives it deliberately. He no longer adapts his life to maintain peace. He is the peace, and others must adapt to him. He doesn't chase female energy. He allows it into his world only if it harmonizes with the structure he's already built. And this is the essence of the Stoic blueprint. A woman may decorate your life, but she may never define it. To embody this blueprint, a man must master the art of emotional boundaries, something few men over 50 have practiced because they spent decades putting everyone else first. Boundaries aren't walls, they're filters. They allow in what aligns with your peace and block what compromises it. When a man enforces these boundaries, he stops absorbing emotions that don't belong to him. He stops carrying responsibilities that drain him. He stops managing crises he didn't cause. He stops sacrificing the routines, rituals, and habits that keep him grounded. This is not selfishness. This is self-preservation. This is self-respect. Women respect the man who sets boundaries, not the man who abandons them. But the most powerful element of the blueprint is something even deeper: the commitment to protect the masculine renaissance at all costs. This chapter of life is too rare, too profound, too important to give away. It is your final ascent, not toward youth, but toward mastery. Toward becoming a man whose presence commands attention, whose silence projects confidence, whose discipline builds a life younger men can only dream of. A man who follows the Stoic blueprint understands that dating casually is safer than committing quickly. It allows connection without sacrifice, intimacy without entanglement, companionship without captivity. It keeps a woman close to your life, but not inside the parts of it she could eventually control or reshape. It keeps your heart open, but your castle intact. And if a woman enters your life who aligns with your rhythm, who respects your solitude, who honors your purpose, who adds peace instead of noise, then you allow her into your world slowly, intentionally, deliberately, not because you need her, but because she amplifies who you already are. The Stoic blueprint is not about avoiding love. It is about avoiding the loss of yourself. Because in your 50 seconds and 60 seconds, the man you become matters more than the relationship you enter. And the wrong woman can cost you not just time, but your final, most powerful evolution. A Stoic man protects that evolution with everything he has. If you've listened this far, then you already know the truth most men never dare to face. The greatest danger in a man's later years is not loneliness. It's losing himself right when he is finally becoming whole. At 50, 60, and beyond. You are not entering the end of your story. You are entering the part where the real character emerges. Not the man shaped by obligation, by survival, by raising a family, by fighting through the storms of youth, but the man shaped by clarity, by discipline, by wisdom, by self-respect. This chapter of your life is not about chasing love. It's about choosing alignment, not about filling silence. It's about mastering it, not about seeking comfort. It's about protecting your freedom, your purpose, your peace. Because if there's one thing Stoicism teaches above all else, it's this: a man's life collapses the moment he lets something external govern his inner world. And no relationship, no matter how warm, how exciting, or how flattering, is worth losing the man you've spent decades becoming. You are in your renaissance. You are sharper than ever, calmer than ever, more dangerous, more grounded, more sovereign than you have ever been. Do not hand that power away because someone made you feel seen. Do not shrink your world because someone wanted more of your time. Do not dim your fire to keep someone else warm. Do not lose your hard-earned freedom for a companionship that costs more than it gives. If a woman enters your life and honors your rhythm, respects your solitude, and strengthens your purpose, then let her walk beside you, but never again walk away from yourself. Because the man you are becoming in this chapter, the man forged from discipline, shaped by endurance, and sharpened by life, is far more valuable than the comfort of any relationship built from fear, loneliness, or emotional dependence. So, if this message resonated with you, if something inside you shifted, if you feel that quiet, powerful recognition in your chest, then let me know you understand the deeper lesson. Drop this phrase in the comments: I choose peace. I choose purpose. And if you want more men to discover this message, to protect their freedom, to reclaim their masculine renaissance, like the video, comment below, subscribe for weekly Stoic guidance, because together we're building something more than a channel. We're building a brotherhood of men who refuse to lose themselves in the final, most powerful act of their lives.